She was thrown out of the boutique because of the way she looked, not knowing who she really was. They tried to keep luxury behind glass, but they didn't calculate that the real power was standing right in front of them. Mornings on Fifth Avenue began with gloss. Marble steps, sparkling shop windows, perfect faces on advertising posters. Every passerby had a rhythmic step, a filtered look, a whisper-level voice. It was a world where everything had to be just right. And if you didn't look right, the air around you became a little colder. Celestine Rowe walked down the sidewalk calmly as if none of this had anything to do with her. A loose black top, straight jeans, lightweight sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a bun. No jewelry, no luxury brand bag. Just a confident posture and a look that was in no hurry. She was a woman used to observing. At 9:54, she approached the Valmira Luxe Boutique, one of the most famous cosmetic boutiques in the city. The windows shimmered with gold. Inside, there were perfectly arranged rows of expensive jars, decorative marble, and impeccably dressed salespeople who looked like they had stepped out of a glossy magazine. Downstairs, at the entrance, a sign shimmered modestly, individual approach to every woman. Without exceptions. Celestine lifted the corner of her lips, barely noticeable, and entered. Inside, the smell was expensive, a mix of amber, vanilla, and something vague but sure. The female consultants stood like mannequins, but as soon as the door closed, their heads turned in unison. An instant assessment. Their gazes met, then immediately slid past. As if she hadn't been there. She moved along the display cases. Slowly, reading the names. Smiling at the light phrases on the packaging. Everything here screamed luxury. And she was silent. Excuse me, madam," a voice came from behind. Celestine turned. A young man with a shaved temple and overpriced shoes stood before her. Garrett Stone, the manager. His name and title were written on his badge in gold letters. He looked at her with forced politeness, like a waiter looking at a guest without a reservation. "We are currently servicing a VIP client. Are you by appointment?" "No. I just wanted to look." He nodded as if that explained a lot. Unfortunately, the boutique works on an individual system. Only by preliminary visits. Especially in the first half of the day. "So, I came too early?" "You came at the wrong time." He said it softly, but leaving no choice. Celestine didn't answer. She simply turned and walked further along the shelves. Garrett stood there, a little puzzled. Jessica, one of the consultants, immediately came over and whispered something to him. He grinned and nodded. A minute later, a security guard appeared, tall, stocky, in a black uniform. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said with a neutral face. "I'll ask you to leave the boutique." Celestine paused, raising her eyebrows slightly. "Why?" "This is the manager's instruction. Due to privacy policy." "And what does this mean?" "So you are causing inconvenience to other customers." She looked around. The store was almost empty. Behind the counter, in the semi-darkness, two girls were examining foundation. "Interesting," she said calmly. "I didn't even have time to ask anything. We can accompany you to the exit if you wish." Celestine's gaze lingered on Garrett. He stood in the back, next to Jessica, watching. Not smiling. Not apologizing. Just like someone who thought he was doing his job right. She looked at the guard. "I can leave myself." He stepped aside. She walked past them all, slowly, with her back straight. No rush. No attempt to prove anything. Just a slight nod to the consultant at the door, the one who was looking away. Outside, the street was the same. But the air felt different. Celestine stopped, pulled out her phone, and snapped a photo of the shop window. Then she opened her notes and wrote, "Valmira Luxe, 958 Fifth Avenue. No friendliness. The product is valued above the customer." Half an hour later, she was sitting at home in a penthouse with panoramic windows. On her lap was a tablet. On the screen was a financial report from the Essentra Global Holding, the owner of several luxury brands, including Valmira Luxe. She leafed through the numbers. Stocks were stable. Investments were growing. Reputation was impeccable. Until this morning. On the nightstand was her personal board pass. She was not a public figure. She preferred to influence from within. Elias, her husband, called it a quiet storm. She made a couple of notes and sent a message to her assistant. "Get some information on Valmira. Customer history. Service. Complaints. I need a full report. And get me a slot at the meeting next week." The response came. "Did something happen?" Celestine smiled. "No. Just reminding some people that a customer's face is more important than their card." That evening, she did not tell Elias about the visit. They sat in their living room, drinking tea. He talked about the negotiations in London about the new investment platform. She listened, nodded, responded softly. But inside, everything was already decided. A system built on contempt would one day become a victim itself. And she wasn't going to let that go unanswered. The morning in the penthouse began with silence, pierced only by the clicking of fingers on the touchpad and the light hum of the coffee machine. Celestine stood by the window in a long gray robe, holding a mug in her hand. The world below her lived its own bustle. Cars hurried, people ran, shop windows were already lighting up. And only here, on the 24th floor, everything was calm. But this was an external calm. Movement was beginning inside. Kayla, her assistant, arrived at exactly 7:30. As always, wearing glasses with a neat folder and 2 phones. "Good morning, Ms. Rowe. The Valmira report is here. Also, Accentra Global is waiting for you." And Kayla hesitated. The network is already spreading the video. Video? From the boutique's security cameras. Someone leaked footage of you being asked to leave. No sound, but the facial expressions are as clear as can be. Celestine wasn't surprised. She simply nodded. "Excellent. Let them see. Now tell me what you learned." The report was accurate. Valmira Luxe is one of the most profitable premium cosmetics chains. Over the past year, 6 new boutiques have opened. But on the brand's internal platform, there are dozens of complaints from customers: cold reception, discrimination based on appearance, forced purchases, dismissive attitude. Everything was carefully hidden, but it was there. And especially often in that boutique on 5th Avenue. Kayla placed the last sheet on the table. The store's general manager is Garrett Stone. He has been working with the chain for 6 years. Before that, he was with a clothing brand, but left after a scandal. A client filed a lawsuit for refusing service due to external inconsistency with the store's style. So he doesn't just behave like that. He has a system. Exactly. Celestine looked out the window. Then we'll have to show him that the system is outdated. The board of directors met in the Accentra office 2 days later. A large glass room, a long table, water in pitchers, and those who were used to deciding the fate of brands with one signature. Celestine entered without delay. Not as a guest, but as an accomplice. In a dark suit with a straight back and a leather folder in her hand. "Mrs. Rowe," said one of the board members, an older man with a shiny tie, "you've asked to attend without being scheduled. We're intrigued." "Thank you, gentlemen," she replied calmly. "I won't take up much of your time. I just want to remind you that brands, especially those in the premium segment, don't just sell a product. They sell an experience, an emotion, a relationship." One of the directors chuckled. "So, you want to discuss marketing?" Celestine's expression didn't change. She pulled out her tablet and played a short clip. No sound. Just a picture: a security guard escorting a woman to the exit. A consultant standing to the side with a twisted face. And Garrett saying something sharply with obvious irritation. The camera from the 2nd floor recorded everything. "This video has 270,000 views in 2 hours. It will be on all the news sites overnight. And we, as investors, must decide what to react first, from a position of strength or from a position of justification." There was silence in the hall. "Do you think this could affect the reputation of the entire network?" asked the woman with the tablet. "No, I think it has already had an impact. And we have 2 paths: concealment or transformation. What do you suggest?" Celestine folded her arms. "A temporary closure of the 5th Avenue boutique. An independent internal investigation. A public statement about the rebranding and values. And then a relaunch of the store. With a new concept. With a new approach. With a new face. And with the new manager, I suppose?" Naturally. Silence again. Some nodded. Some avoided looking. "Do you want to take control of this?" "Yes. Not as the investor's wife, but as a client who remembered what it was like to be unwanted in a store that positions itself as open to everyone." After the council, she went out into the corridor where Kayla was waiting for her. "How did it go?" "They are surprised, but they understand." "And your plan?" "Tomorrow I'll go there again. Not just as a buyer." That evening, Celestine sat on the terrace with Elias. He was reading, she was drinking green tea. He knew she didn't like to discuss work at home, but he asked anyway. "Are you calm?" "More than I was. I'm not angry. I just don't want to be silent anymore. They will understand everything. Perhaps. But it's not just important that they understand. It's important that they remember." Elias nodded. "That's why you were always stronger than me." She chuckled. "No. I just had the opportunity to learn to see those whom others ignore. The day was clear and deceptively calm. The morning sun streamed down the facades of Fifth Avenue buildings, reflecting in the shop windows, as if nothing was about to change. People walked with coffee in their hands, with phones to their ears, with their eyes piercing the space ahead past each other. Valmira Lux opened at 10 o'clock as usual. Jessica, one of the consultants, stood at the window, adjusting the carefully displayed jars of limited edition serum. Garrett, as usual, was drinking his morning espresso in his glass-walled office, scrolling through the news on his tablet. He already knew about the video. He had seen the comments, but he was sure it would die down. It always did. He even chuckled as he scrolled through another article. The internet is outraged again. No one is surprised. Jess, he called, take the dry skin ruler off the top shelf. It's not for display. Yes, Garrett. At that moment, the door opened. Celestina entered the boutique, but no longer in sneakers and a hoodie. She was wearing a deep blue jumpsuit of a strict cut, with a thin gold belt and a high collar. Her heels confidently tapped on the marble floor. Her hair was perfectly styled. There was light makeup on her face, calmness and cold precision in every movement. Garrett walked out of the office, not recognizing her at first. His eyes narrowed for just a second, as he instinctively realized she was back. "Good morning," he said in a formal voice. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Celestina replied. "Please call the account manager and the regional representative. They should be here at opening, according to today's protocol." Garrett recoiled mentally, but remained cold outwardly. "Excuse me, but who exactly are you?" "Celestine Rowe. I represent the Essentra Supervisory Board. I am here today as a special curator for internal reform of Valmira Lux." For a second, the boutique was so quiet that you could hear the lock on the perfume display click. Jessica froze, holding the bottle. Larry, the security guard who had just finished the morning shift, adjusted his collar, unsure what to do. Garrett tried to pull himself together. "Miss Rowe, we of course didn't know. You knew how to treat people," she interrupted. "And you chose humiliation." She glanced around the room. Everything was the same as that day. The same shelf, the same light, the same atmosphere of disdain. "Your store is temporarily closed today." "What?" Jessica's voice broke. "You can't just." "I can. And I do." Celestine turned to her. "You will also be removed from the staff until the internal investigation is completed. You will both be reviewed by the legal department. All client data, camera footage, correspondence have already been transferred to the corporate committee." "But it's just a misunderstanding," Garrett said dully. "I was acting according to the standard. Then the standard will be rewritten." Because it turned out to be not just outdated, it became toxic. 15 minutes later, the boutique's doors were closed. The employees ushered the customers out, explaining that maintenance work was underway. The company's press service had already received the text of the official statement. It began with the words, "We believe that true luxury is respect, and we recognize that somewhere this respect has been lost." Elias arrived at the boutique later, accompanied by a lawyer and the head of public relations. He entered without pomp, without security. Just a document in a folder and a look that read, "We've been turning a blind eye to this for too long." Garrett stood at the counter like a student caught in a lie, his perfectly pressed suit no longer looking like armor. "Mr. Stone," Elias began, "you no longer represent the interests of our company. You can't just." "We can. And we must. Not because the internet is angry, but because we don't need a system where humiliation is considered a strategy." Celestine came closer. "You didn't recognize me then, Garrett. And that's okay. But how you decided who I was is your mistake. And it's mistakes like that destroy brands." Slowly, from the inside, he was silent. He couldn't find an answer. He just watched as everything he considered his crumbled right in his hands. When everyone left, Celestine was left alone in the room. She went to the same display case where she had stood. Her reflection was on the glass. On the shelf was a bottle of perfume with the label Dignite. She picked it up, brought it to her face, and inhaled the scent. The smell was expensive. But now, for the first time, it didn't seem fake. She put the bottle back and said into the void, "It's time to remind you that beauty is not a mask. It is a reflection of choice." It had been 2 months since the Fifth Avenue boutique closed. To the average person, it looked like a planned renovation. Frosted glass windows appeared on the windows with the words, "Coming soon." A new era begins here. But behind those windows, something more was happening than just a makeover. Celestina entered the room where the final inspection was taking place. Everything had been rebuilt, the lighting had become softer without the icy white. Instead of a glossy floor, there was a warm gray stone. In the center, there was an island with products available to everyone. Under the glass were not only luxury bottles, but also care lines adapted to different skin types, ages, and ethnic characteristics. On the walls were photos of ordinary women without retouching, with captions like, "I am the face of this brand because I am real." Celestine walked along the displays. The new name, Lumira, glittered modestly without gold. Just letters, strict, confident. She nodded to Kayla, who stood with a tablet. "Almost ready. Should we launch the press on schedule?" "No. First, the employees." Retraining began on the first day of reforms. Instead of how to sell, classes on communication culture, psychological perception, respect for clients. Instead of standard uniforms, universal silhouettes, permission for individual elements. Instead of internal hierarchy, open discussions. Celestine personally held meetings with everyone who remained on the team. "We're not going to remake you," she said at the first meeting. "We're just going to take away everything that keeps you from being yourself. Because that's what really sells, authenticity." Nobody clapped, but they looked at her differently. With interest, with respect, and with cautious hope. The official opening was scheduled for September 3rd. No red carpet. No celebrities. Just invited clients, activists, doctors, women from charity programs, young entrepreneurs, those whose opinions had never been considered influential before. A small queue had formed in front of the doors. Some were taking pictures of the shop window, others were reading the sign and whispering, "Is this the story? About that woman in the shop?" Yes, that was the story. Only now is its second chapter. Inside, in the presentation area, Celestine stepped up to the microphone. She was wearing a white pantsuit and clear glasses, which made her seem a little softer than usual. She wasn't giving a speech. She was simply saying, "The day I walked into the boutique and was shown the door, I didn't think I'd come back. But it turns out that even the most painful humiliation can be the beginning of transformation." She paused. Lumira isn't just a name. It's a reminder that every person is a light, and that the brand's job is not to blind, but to illuminate the path of yourself, of others. To her left stood a girl in a hijab. To her right, a woman in a wheelchair. Behind her were the new consultants, different, real, alive. "We want you to not just buy cosmetics here. We want you to feel seen here." That evening, Celestine walked home. She didn't like cars on days when something really important was happening. The body had to move. The city had to be felt underfoot. She stopped at the corner where the street musicians were standing. Their music was raw, a little false, but sincere. She took a banknote out of her bag, put it in a case, and one of the guys nodded at her, not recognizing her. And she smiled and walked on. At the crossroads, Elias called her. "I saw the broadcast. You were brilliant. I was myself. Do you think this will change the industry?" "I think it will change someone specific. And that's enough." He fell silent. Then he asked, "How do you feel?" "It's like I got my voice back. Not just for myself, but for others too." That night she couldn't sleep. She sat in a chair by the window watching the city lights flicker. On the table in front of her lay an old diary. She opened it and found a page with a note from those very days. "Valmira Lux, 958. No friendliness. The product is valued above the customer." She crossed out one line and wrote next to it, "Now it's the other way around." The Fifth Avenue store had been operating under the new name for a month. Customers came not for the brands, but for the atmosphere. Here, a smile wasn't a must, it came from within. It was no longer a condescending, "Are you sure this is your price range?" but rather, "What are you comfortable using? What makes you you?" Lumira became more than a store. It became a place where people tried to be heard. And it was felt in every detail, in the photos of employees on the wall, in the stickers with names, in the coffee that was served to clients in the waiting area if the consultant was busy. Celestine came rarely. She didn't like to be the center of attention when everything was already working. For her, the power was in the launch, in the idea, in giving a push. Then to step aside. To observe. But one day she was informed that Garrett Stone had come to the store. He didn't look like the same person. The formal suit had been replaced by a light gray jacket and jeans. His hair had grown out. His face was tired, aged, but reserved. He stood by the wall and looked at the display case. He was calm. He didn't ask to speak to anyone. He just looked. The guard, new but trained, immediately recognized him but did not chase him away. He came up to him and asked softly, "Can I help you with something?" Garrett shook his head. "No. I just wanted to see." Celestine came to him herself. No warning. No camera. Just a woman who still had a question and maybe now an answer. "Good afternoon, Mr. Stone." He turned around. He saw her. And he didn't pretend. "I knew you would show up. And you still came?" "I wanted to see what happened to what I considered mine." "And what do you see?" He fell silent. He looked around. "I see a place where once there was fictitious importance. And now real value." "That's nice to hear." He sighed. "I was sure I was right. I was sure I knew who was worthy and who wasn't. But you didn't raise your voice. You didn't sue. You made it worse. You showed me who I was. And that was worse than if you had screamed." Celestine bowed her head. "Sometimes the truth is not a war. It's a mirror. It doesn't attack. It just shows." Garrett looked down. "I'm consulting for a regional convenience store chain right now. A basic store, nothing fancy. And I'm learning to listen. Learning to ask what's comfortable for you. Not what can you afford." Celestine nodded. "So you have learned to see after all." "Thank you," he answered quietly. When he left, she remained at the display case. One of the new employees approached her, a girl with short curly hair, in a stylish light sweatshirt and a badge, Sophia. Her face was shining. "Is it true that you were at the origins of this reboot?" "Is it true?" "Thank you," said Sophia. "Because thanks to you, I'm here. I walked by on opening day and thought they'll never hire me. And then I saw your speech. And I sent in my resume." Celestine smiled. "You opened this door yourself. I just removed the sign that said entrance only to the chosen ones." Later, she walked through the city and looked at people. Ordinary. Different. Those who were ignored. Those whose dignity does not wear logos. Those who used to be told, "Sorry, this is not for you." And now for them. A notification came through on her phone, an article about Lumira in a business publication. When respect became the new luxury. She didn't open it. She knew that the main thing was not what they wrote, but what would be done next. It was quiet in the house in the evening. Elias was reading, lying on the sofa. She sat next to him, staring out the window. He touched her hand. "You have the look of a winner today." "No," she said, smiling. "Today, I have the look of a woman who knows that she was right to return to that store." He nodded slightly. "And what next?" And then she took a sip of tea. "Let others come in there and feel that no one is measuring them from the moment they enter." The next day, Kayla brought her a new folder labeled Next Project, Southern Drugstore Chain. Celestine opened it. She turned the first page and said, "Forward. Share your opinion about this story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you don't miss new stories."